AJ Toney is a high upside wide receiver to me. However, I will admit that there's two ways to look at his route to Alabama A&M, and I want to know which perspective that you choose to see it from. Oh yeah, it's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me, making Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day, every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. We'll wrap up today's episode with a couple of sound bites from the HBCU Swingman Classic luncheon because I was able to sit down today with a couple of people who are invested in the event, and I thought I had some pretty good sound bites that I wanted to make sure I shared with you. Prior to that, we'll be looking at Dawn Thornton's comments on the SWAC women's basketball rescheduling and the fact that women's basketball will now have their own day. You know, no more just two double headers. And I think that Dawn Thornton did a good job describing her mixed emotions. Excuse me. But we'll start off today's episode also looking at Alabama A&M. And for me, they just brought in a very high upside player who is very interesting. When I look at AJ Toney, the wide receiver, former of Samford, former of Middle Tennessee State, to me, both of those things are important. Like, yes, you want to get a full story of where this guy comes from. But I think just actually breaking down how his career went in two completely different directions as far as Samford and Middle Tennessee State, to me, that does give a full picture of what Alabama A&M could be stepping into in 2024. And that's the only year that he'll have eligibility. He's only had 1 year eligibility left. This is his sixth season. Well, you know, we talk about where he comes from. Let's take it back a little bit. He is a Birmingham native. He's returning home. Come back to Alabama to play for Alabama A&M. So he is, in a way, going through a homecoming of sorts. But that's not what you really care about here, right? That's not the juicy storyline. The juicy storyline is I teased it in the beginning of the show. What was AJ Toney's route to Alabama A&M? And then also, what are the two ways that you could really look at this? Because I genuinely believe that you could completely disagree with me. And I usually don't operate like this, but you could completely disagree with me wholeheartedly. And I understand where you're coming from. Most times I don't have that same open-mindedness if I'm coming in with a strong take, especially on something on the show. I would have to be proven contrary, right? But on this one, I really think a lot of how you could feel about it is perspectives. And what it comes down to is AJ Toney's health and his health concerns over the last couple of seasons. I think that this is a real thing that I must address. When you look at his first couple of years at Samford, healthy as can be, right? Played every single game in his first, I say 2 years, right? Because you had the spring season too, is kind of weird, but that was an abbreviated season, but he did play every game in that abbreviated season. So the health concerns over the last 3 years, though, that's a little bit different. I couldn't find anything health-wise on why he missed a few games in the fall 21 season. He only played 7 games that year. I can only assume that if you hit the 7-game marker, it's likely something health-related, but this is speculation, right? This is pure speculation. Now, you look at the last 2 years he was at Middle Tennessee State, he never finished the season. In his first year at Middle Tennessee State, which was 2022, he only played until October. I think October 15th was his last game. Then you look at his last year, 2023, at Middle Tennessee State. He played 2 games, and he's gone. Now, there's questions about durability. When you look at players in the transfer portal, how many players do we see, whether you're a full FCS fan or just HBCUs? How many times do we see players who are on the FCS level go to the FBS level, right, to bigger schools, and it's like, oh, that didn't work, I'm coming back down to the FCS level? I feel like we've seen that a lot. But the thing about Toney for me is that he's not necessarily tainted. And this is where it comes differently, because it genuinely depends on who you are. Because you may feel like his injuries taint him. For me, him being a 1-year piece, I don't necessarily feel that way. For me, it's a 1-year rental. If you play 7 games, which he's done before, he played 7 games in the spring season. He played 7 games in his last year at Sanford. He played 7 games, I believe, in his first Middle Tennessee season. At least 7, I think. It was around that ballpark. Then you have the 2-game season. Now that's concerning. If I get 2 games out of him, I'm pretty upset. But I'm going to bank on getting about 7 games out of AJ Toney. And I highly doubt that I'm sitting here saying he has to be my number 1 receiver. This is what I need to do. I don't think that Alabama A&M is sitting there like that, as if they're dependent on their success for AJ Toney. The reason I say that is because look when he comes in. Y'all know how I feel. AJ Toney has a high upside. When you see what he has done in his past before he came to Middle Tennessee State, you'll see that. And I'll backdoor it at the end by giving you some of the numbers and things of that nature. Or some of the accolades, probably. I'll probably just stick with the accolades because I don't think the numbers are overly important to me for real. But when you look at him as just a 1-year rental, I'll take that on. I forgot where I was headed with that, to be honest. So I understand that injury probably provides its own set of concerns about durability and all of those things and all of those questions. I would just say that's not as important to me because I can get set. Oh, that's where I was going with it. I highly doubt that Alabama A&M is sitting here depending on AJ Toney to be the main force of their offense. They might not even be expecting him to be the main force of the passing offense. I can guarantee you that Donovan Eaglin in the backfield is going to be the thing that keeps this locomotive out there at Alabama A&M pushing. But you know what I feel? If you're coming in June, I'm not expecting a whole lot from you. Now, you're a 1-year guy, so I'm assuming that your experience in the multiple training camps that you've been through will help you get acclimated to the playbook and things of that nature quicker. That being said, I never look for impact players. Quarterbacks are the only exception because I think you can get them pretty late. I do not look for impact players after the spring for real, especially not as we get into the summer. Now, Toney did want to make his decision by the end of April. He got all of his offers by the end of April, but he didn't make his decision until June. Depends on how you feel, right? Smack your lips at that. It is what it is. But for me, a guy who has not proven he doesn't have the ability because he only played 9 games with Middle Tennessee State, that's not enough for me to really have a sample size. He may still be that player who was excellent on the FCS level. He may still be that player who felt like he had played well enough to make it to an FBS school and compete. He may still be that player. See, sometimes when you don't succeed on that higher level, we taint you. But I've seen what he's been on the FCS level. All freshman, all conference the next year. Then the fall, I don't think he got an accolade that year. But you're looking at the first 2 years, he was an all freshman team member. Then in the spring, he was an all second team conference member. So this is what I've seen you do on the FCS level. I know it didn't succeed on the FBS. I know it didn't shine through. I know you had injuries, but I want to see if you can dial the clock back. Injuries aside, I think those are the 2 ways to look at his injury history, though. Me, he's a 1-year rental. You, or maybe you're with me, but let's say you're opposing me. You, this guy, he can't stay healthy. It's 1 year. We'll see what he can do. Now, as we push forward, we're going to stay in that same area. We're going to stay over there at Alabama A&M. But instead, we're going to go to the women's basketball team. We're going to look at Dawn Thornton because Dawn Thornton has some really good comments. I really did enjoy her take on how she feel about the SWAC women's basketball having their own night starting this upcoming season. Let's recap what that is in case you didn't catch Monday's episode. And then also look at what she said as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. If you have any tickets that you want to buy, I suggest that you go to Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code Locked On College. You get $20 off your first purchase. Right now, that'll stop. That $20 off will end after your first purchase, but I can guarantee the spending won't, because you're looking at the best prices that you can find anywhere. You're looking at the best last minute ticket deals that you can find, whether it's flash deals, zone deals, whether it's just go ahead and go in ahead of time and getting yourself your tickets. You can view your seat from where you sit with Gametime. So, I would hate to get one of those seats where they block you, right? Because you have that cinder block in the way. I hate those things. With Gametime, you'll never make that mistake. It's your choice, because you get to view the view of what you're watching from your seat before even buying the ticket. Whether it's concerts, whether it's athletic events, whether it's theater plays, and anything in between or else that you want. Go ahead and go to Gametime, download the app, and create an account today to get $20 off your first purchase. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day. Every day for your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On Sports Today. It's the first of its kind, 24/7, all day, every day. Sports network on YouTube. Go to Locked On Sports Today and subscribe. And remember to spell the whole thing, Locked On Sports Today. Now, Dawn Thornton has commented on the women's basketball change of scheduling via the SWAC. I think this was a big deal. I'm not actually hearing enough about it. I know I'm a little bit late because I had a lot of things planned out. I had Gerald Huggins on Friday, and then I had to come all the way back to get to this on Monday. So maybe I'm just a little bit delayed, and it just so happened that Thursday was my brother's birthday. So, I kind of been out of it a little bit, but I don't feel like I'm hearing enough. I'm a little late to the party, but I don't feel like I was hearing enough in the interim anyway. For me, this is a huge deal. This is a big gamble. Go back to Monday's episode if you haven't heard it yet. This is something that I think is extremely risky for the SWAC. This is something I think that is an extreme gamble for the SWAC. I like the gamble. I'm not here to talk down on it. I think that you have to move a certain kind of way. I'm sorry. I said I would tell you what it is. So basically, the SWAC usually has Saturday and Monday games, both of which are doubleheaders. That will no longer be the case. The men will play on Saturday and they will play on Monday, but the women will play on Thursday and they'll play on Saturday. So you're keeping that one game. You're keeping that one game as a doubleheader, but you're separating them for real half of the time. So I want to hear what Dawn Thornton has to say, hear what the diva coach out there at Alabama A&M has to say about this, because I really do enjoy her comments on this, and it kind of lines up with why I think that the decision is a gamble and what the SWAC needs to do. It just kind of reinforces some of the things that I already believed. So let's read off her comments. We don't have a video, but let's read it off. She says, and I quote, "I have mixed emotions. Those double headers are something that I know our fans and community looked forward to. However, with the trajectory that women's basketball is going in right now, it's great to be the highlighted team, be that premier team, and have your own night." I'm right there with Thornton. I have mixed feelings about this. I have mixed emotions. Maybe not necessarily for the same reason, right? Because she's thinking about community. She's thinking about fan and what the fans are desiring. I'm not thinking about fan service at all. I'm honestly thinking about dollar bills, right? That's really what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about financially what's going to happen. Those are my concerns. Those are my priorities. But I think that she has a good point. Mine doesn't have anything to do with fan service, but that's another thing to think about. Fans probably like that. And I don't think the SWAC is ignorant of it, because the SWAC does realize that there's a certain valuable or a certain value to keeping the men's and women's game together. That's likely why they did it on Saturday. One of the things I talked to Mo Carter about was the idea of timing of game. Timing of game keeps you from being able to attend at certain times. So now if Thursday, instead of 5:30, it's at 7:30. Oh, well, I can get off work. I can come home. I might be able to get into the house for a second, pick up the family if I need. Like, I have more options to do these things. So maybe the time limit or the time change is something that plays a part. But then also on Saturday, you off probably. So you can just go ahead and come in. So if we're going to have any day to have a doubleheader, let's do it on that Saturday, because it's already the weekend. You're probably already off. And if you want to come to this game, you can. Looking at the back half, I do think that the trajectory does play a part. I think we would be foolish to say that it doesn't. And I think they're trying to capitalize on the moment. Rightfully so. Before I expand on their attempt to capitalize on the moment, let's look at the rest of her quote because it does kind of continue with the idea of where women's basketball is today. Remember, there is a heightened awareness and a heightened excitement around women's basketball. I don't even think that it's stopping at the collegiate level. I think a lot of times that I've spoken about it, I've said there's a heightened interest in collegiate women's basketball. I've seen over this last course of the WNBA season, I'm seeing more W talk as well. It's not just collegiate. I'm seeing more professional. I'm not as tuned in with high school sports, but you probably are seeing more of that. I'm seeing more girls flag football. I'm seeing more inclusion of women in sports, period. But we're talking about basketball at the moment. So I just wanted to throw that out there, though. That being said, let's look at the rest of this quote. She says, that's where the game is evolving. It may take a while for everybody to get used to it, but women's basketball deserves to have some prime time. Number one, don't bring in immediate dividends. Don't bank on them, excuse me. I like that because it takes a little bit of pressure off. Because I think that when things change and we have a change that people are a little bit hesitant about, when those type of changes happen, people who want you to fail only judge you off of immediate payback. What you get immediately is the only thing that really matters. And it's like, nah, I don't necessarily think that that is the truth. I don't operate with that same logic because if I don't think that women's basketball can stand alone, of course it's going to take some time for something new to really grab on. There's some exceptions, but for the most part, you're looking at something new takes a little bit of time. I like that she's pointing out that, hey, we're going to temper these expectations. And for those who want to try to use that against them, it's not really a strong tool, at least not to her. If you're having that conversation with her, it wouldn't be a strong tool. Also, not only is, I think another part of this is not only is women's basketball isolated. Here goes an underrated part about this. And this is something that I think that Dawn Thornton maybe was alluding to. Maybe I just heard her comment and I pulled it in that direction. But the idea that it may take a while for everybody to get used to it. This is a new date. Not only are they playing isolated, women's basketball is playing on Thursday when games aren't usually had. See, it's usually Mondays and Saturdays. But now SWAC women's basketball will stand alone on a completely new date. People may not even be really accustomed to going to basketball on Thursdays. So you got to have all of those things come into play. All of these things come into play. Number two is I do agree that they deserve to get prime time and they're getting it at important times too. So this is just kind of leaning into what I've already said about this is kind of already leaning to what I said about the trajectory and the idea that women's sports is getting more appreciation, more love. This is a great time to capitalize. However, the SWAC, and this is point number three, the SWAC can't think this is enough. The SWAC cannot think that simply having this event isolated is enough. You are not truly capitalized. You are capitalizing off the moment, but you're not capitalizing off it fully if the only thing you do is say, all right, cool, women's basketball has their own day. And I hope that this is taken as respectfully as possible. There is an attendance problem around all sports, in my opinion, around all sports. It's not great. People always want to talk about attendance, depending on the school you go to. But attendance has been a talking point for a long time. And it should be a talking point for women's basketball. Having them stand alone should only heighten this talking point. And if you want to have positive conversations, because a talking point can be negative or positive, if you want to have a positive conversation, then you need to maximize the ceiling or help you or help you reach the ceiling on what that attendance can be. That means game day themes. I'm not saying you have to treat this and beg people to come out or treat this like it's charity or, man, please come out to this game. I'm not saying that. But what we do need to do is make sure that people are invested. Make sure that you have certain nights. Hey, this is pink out night during breast cancer awareness month, right? I know that won't be happening during conference season, but like just in general, you see things like that. Have those. This is whiteout. This is we're gonna go blackout. We're preparing for the rival's funeral. Everybody come in black. Like that's kind of stuff. I think you're gonna need that. I think you want to do things to make people buy in. You're gonna want to make people come in on places that they haven't, because women's basketball attendance has not been great. And now that they're standing alone, the attendance will only be under a greater magnifying glass. So if you want to make sure that you're truly capitalizing, if you want to make sure that you're doing everything that you can to help them reach their ceiling, then you can't just say, we gave you your own night, you're now your own deal, and that's enough. It doesn't work that way. It won't be effective. I just don't think that it'll be effective. But as we push forward, let's talk about something that should be effective, and that is the the HBCU MLB Swingman Classic at the All-Star Week, and that'll take place on next Friday. So let's get a couple of sound bites from the media luncheon that we went to today as we continue with Locked On HBCU. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day, making it all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. I'll talk about this event next week, probably maybe Wednesday or Thursday, somewhere as we get closer, but the HBCU Swingman Classic will be taking place on, is it Saturday or Friday? I can't remember. I think it's Saturday. I think it's the 12th, but it's Friday or Saturday. Right now I just can't. No, actually, let's just Google it because I made that same mistake earlier today, and I think it's the HBCU Swingman Classic 2024 is on. Oh, Friday's the 12th. So I was right. The 12th is the date, but I thought that Friday was the 11th. Oh, anyway, that's me learning how to read a calendar and remember it. But in all seriousness, I thought it was the 12th, but anyway, that doesn't matter. It is Friday the 12th. That is the date that the HBCU Swingman Classic will be. I went to the media luncheon. You had 3 individuals who were there. You had Dale Matthews. You had Reggie Miller, or excuse me, not Reggie Waller. And then you also had Mark McLemore. And those 3 men were all there to talk about this event. I had some sound bites with both Waller and then also with Matthews. And we were talking about the year 2 jump. I want to play this, and I'm going to play a community or a sound bite about the baseball in the Black community as we just kind of sign out of today's episode. But here goes a video talking about the jumps that they're trying to make from year 1 of the Swingman Classic to year 2.
Yeah, I think if you're going to have an HBCU event, you got to have the sound. And so to have the Ocean of Soul and the Marching Storm here representing the bands from Texas, HBCUs, it was just the perfect storm, if you will. And so just excited to hear those bands, to give those college students the opportunity to perform here at the Lowe's Light Field to celebrate baseball. We felt would just make it more of like a homecoming type event. And that's really what we're trying to do, is just to add more culture and flavor to baseball so that we create more fans and generate interest in our game.
Well, first of all, the high energy and we had a great game last year in Seattle. But one of the things that Andre Dawson, at the conclusion of the game, he said, "Hey, Reggie, we need to have the Battle of the Bands." I think it's just going to be more about us. It's going to be more about the way we celebrate and the way that we go against each other and we challenge each other and bring a better game as a result of, hey, talking at each other and making sure they clap back at them. That's what I like. And that's what that enthusiasm is, should be much, much greater here in the DFW area because of all of the HBCUs that are in proximity of the Metroplex.
Yeah, well, coming to Texas, they say things are bigger in Texas, so we're excited to see what the DFW community here in Arlington, they're going to come out and support. We're going to add to it with having the bands here, and we've got some other activations for the student athletes to just make it a great experience. And so we'll continue to build and fine-tune and add different elements with the coaching staff and with the broadcast and with photographers from HBCU and reporters, and for kids that are pursuing professional opportunities, for them to come here to a jewel event through Major League Baseball and have the opportunity to get some experience and exposure adds to the event as well. So really a comprehensive experience from the student athletes that are on the field as well as the students that aren't on the field to hopefully engage in our sport.
You have that moment, right, in which I'm talking, that goes Dale Matthews, Reggie Waller, Dell Matthews again. And also, Dell better be happy he's a Texas Southern alum. Gotta let that little Dallas stuff slip. All right. You either call it Arlington or the DFW. I'm stupid, bro. But if y'all know me, y'all know I don't like calling it Arlington, Dallas. I don't like that. But anyway, neither here nor there. I'm a proud Arlington native. I love the idea of bringing the culture to, because when I was asked what would change, I didn't know what answer I would get. When I asked how would it elevate, I didn't know what answer I would get. So when you're looking at year one of the HBCU Swingman Classic, that was driven by Ken Griffey Jr. And with all due respect, Ken Griffey Jr. in Seattle, you can't go wrong with it. So if he's leaning into this, it's an instant success. That's just the way I look at it, right? It's not that it's a success no matter what. It's that I think all the things you need to have be a success or have to consider it a success will happen as long as you have Ken Griffey Jr. in Seattle. Come on, bro. Ken Griffey Jr. could probably do this anywhere, but in Seattle, it's raps. Whether you're in Seattle, whether you're in the DFW, whether in Arlington, no matter what, right? I thought this was a cool. Oh, also, sorry. So you don't have Ken Griffey Jr. this time. You need to have something else that you can lean into. And the culture of HBCUs, to me, is the perfect thing to lean into because it's one of the most attractive parts of our national appeal is the culture that we bring. That's one of the things that's greater than a lot of other aspects when you talk about the ability to reach out nationwide. Now, I want to play this last clip. Actually, I'm going to save this clip. I'm not even going to talk about the community right now. So I'm going to save this clip for another day because I'm sure that we'll talk about this event sometime next week. On tomorrow, or we're not going to have an episode tomorrow. On Friday's episode, we'll be looking at FAMU and the myth of continuity. So we'll see. Hopefully y'all don't hate me after this, but if you do, it's okay because I'll say something good and you'll love me again. So I know it's temporary, but in the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.